Hi everybody, Terry Ryder from Hotspotting. We're going to launch the event tonight very soon. We're just waiting until our link to Facebook is established. It takes a few minutes to get the live stream to Facebook going. Until that happens, we'll talk amongst ourselves. We're here tonight with Nicola McDougall, who, amongst other notable things, has recently been in Rarotonga. What were you doing there, Nicola?
It was one of my best friend's 50th birthdays.
Okay.
Yes, so I went over there, and unfortunately the week that I was there, the weather wasn't great. But a very nice, very small place, but a very, very nice place, nice and relaxing. If only I'd had better weather. But I think they had better weather after I left, so that's good. So
part of the Cook Islands?
Yes, indeed.
What's the real estate like in that part of the world?
Oh, what would you say? What would you call it? Rustic? Okay. Rustic would be the right term. There is actually a old it's not working there, is it? There is actually an old abandoned, I think it's a Sheraton resort that's like just would make a great venue for a horror movie, actually.
Okay, but doesn't sound like great real estate.
No, not at all. I mean, a lot of, and obviously the real estate there goes from family to family through the generations, and people are often buried on that land as well, which is quite, unique to see. People that have lived most of their lives overseas, often when they have passed away, come home and be buried on the land from which they came.
Okay, so I've just got a message for them.
It's
live streamed.
It is just coming on, and I think we now appear to be live.
Okay, thanks. So, hello everybody, and welcome to this special webinar streaming live on Facebook. We think, we hope. I'm Terry Ryder, founder of Hotspotting, and I'm here with the Hotspotting General Manager Tim Graham and our special guest Nicola McDougall to speak about women in real estate. We're having this discussion this evening because of the alignment of a number of things, including Mother's Day coming up, the federal budget this week, and the ongoing success of the award-winning book, The Female Investor. Our special guest, Nicola McDougall, wrote The Female Investor along with buyer's agent Kate Hill, and it won the Personal Finance and Investment category at the Australian Business Book Awards last year. And Nicola's also president of PIPA, which is the Property Investment Professionals of Australia. And she also runs a successful PR business specialising in helping real estate clients like us at Hotspotting. And thanks to Nicola, Hotspotting is beginning stacks of media publicity in recent months. So Nicola, you must be a very good time manager to do all that you do.
Oh, thank you for that introduction, Terry. That was amazing. Thanks so much. I am actually, if I'm going to big note myself, very good. I've been, I started out as a journalist, and journalist, obviously, it's all about deadlines. And I'm actually a former newspaper journalist back in the days when there were lots of newspapers. So I'm very good with deadlines. And I still, ever since, I haven't worked as a newspaper journalist for many years, but I still, I guess, use the same strategies all the time, which is, I have a schedule every week that I keep to. There's deadlines that internal deadlines, I suppose, that I keep, that I make sure I keep myself. Obviously, I've got, client deadlines as well. So I think being a journalist and working in the newspaper environment, I'm talking about more than 20 years ago, things were much different. And you had strict deadlines that you had to keep to. You had to produce stories every day. Sometimes you were producing daily stories, but you're also producing bigger stories that might run in a week or two. So you had to be very good with time management to be able to, hit those deadlines.
So those skills have stood you in good stead. I come from the same background. I must say many of the skills I learned way back then, including shorthand, is something that I still use every single day today.
I never got to do I never managed to master shorthand, I must admit, because by the time I was doing it, we did do classes when I was a cadet. I was terrible. And then obviously by that stage, it was kind of a lot of a recording of interviews. So you got a bit lazy, I suppose.
Okay, so today we're here to talk about real estate investment, particularly from the viewpoint of the female investor. And as I think I said to you the other day, given that real estate doesn't care who buys it, why was there a need for a book directed specifically at female investors in real estate.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's a passion of mine. I've been a single female investor for many years. Bought my first property as a single lady back in early 2007. And then went on to buy 3 more as a single person. So for me, I was always really interested in passing on all the information and things that I've learned over the years. Then a number of years ago, I was fortunate enough to meet Kate Hill, and we really bonded, I guess, over both of us wanting to help educate women. Obviously, we know the statistics that are out there about the inferior financial results for women, not only during their working lives, but certainly into retirement. And that was when we decided to write the book a number of years ago, that was what was really motivating us. We also know that women's super balances are far lower than men's at retirement too. So when we sat down and put our heads together and talked about the fact that both of us individually were really keen to write a book like this, we had an epiphany at the Opera Bar in Sydney, and went, well, holy moly, we should do this together. We joined forces and joined the contents of our head, and there are various different expertise as well. Clearly I've been a property and finance journalist for a long time, and an investor myself, but Kate is a professional buyer's agent. She's a qualified property investment advisor as well, and a property investor. And I think the combination of both of our backgrounds and both of our passions really made the book far better than it would have been if we'd tried to do it individually.
So I read the book when it first came out, and I thought it was a great book. And we do give it away to our premium members, male or female, because I think it's a great book for anyone who's interested in real estate investment. But the introduction to it really lays out the case why there needs to be, in particular, a book directed at women investors, talking about the income pay gap, which even in the 21st century is as stubbornly significant as it was in years gone by. The fact that the super balance for women on average is 17% lower than men, and that many women still retire with any funds whatsoever. And some of them end up homeless because of that, or having to sell the family home to go into cheaper accommodation because they just don't have any funds.
And what's in a way, it's kind of got worse from when we, 3 years ago decided to write the book and obviously did the research that we included in the book too. The fastest growing demographic of homeless people in this country are single women aged over 55. And that has come about the last couple of years. So that was really a big motivator for us. And the gender pay gap continues to be the same. Whether that'll ever be parity, who knows? But at least it's part of the general conversation now. I mean, we're all aware of it. There are companies out there that are doing their utmost to ensure pay parity, and also, I guess, when it comes to leadership positions, board positions, and things like that, we are starting to see more women in those leadership roles, because I've always been a strong believer in you can't be what you can't see. And that's certainly the case with property investment or just financial literacy, because there has been the difference between the genders, I think, over the decades as well, which has, left women in a poorer financial position. Of course, a big part of the book as well is about promoting the idea of financial independence from each other, whether you are, a heterosexual couple in a relationship, or you're a same-sex couple. What we really try to, I guess, to unpack and explore in the book was the concept of financial independence from each other, which might sound a little odd, but it's about the fact that we can, with people obviously, whether they've got a degree or not, and they're younger, they can earn a decent income when they're younger, perhaps go off and buy something themselves when they're younger, of no matter what gender they are, and retain ownership of that property throughout their lives. We just think that was a great concept to allow people to have more choices later on if they decided to partner up, or if they did partner up and that relationship failed, which unfortunately a significant percentage still do.
Yeah, it was mentioned in the book in the introduction that sort of half of all marriages or partnerships in Australia end in divorce, And it also made the point that women are twice as likely as men to sell the home to move to lower cost of accommodation because of financial circumstances, and that many women are forced to re-enter the workforce after they've retired because they can't afford to live without doing so, and they have no sort of investment funds behind them.
Yeah, and you know, it's an unfortunate reality that generally speaking, there are a number of government agencies that produce wonderful research and statistics and analysis on this. But it's an unfortunate, you know, reality, a fact of life that generally in a relationship breakdown, the woman's financial situation will worsen, and generally speaking, it might never recover from that. For example, perhaps you only own the one property together with your partner, and if the relationship breaks down, you would sell that property. Generally speaking, the woman, the female may not be able to then re-enter the property market because she might have been out of the workforce, or you know, the jobs that she's been doing don't bring in enough money for her to qualify for a big enough loan for her to even go off and, you know, replace that property in some degree. Whereas generally speaking, the research shows that that's not the case for men. And that means that women often get caught in what's called a poverty trap, where they used to be, you know, in a home that they own together with their partner. That if the relationship breaks down, they may then find themselves, yes, okay, they might, you know, get a share of the proceeds of that, but it's still not enough for them to re-enter the property market, and then they're stuck as renters perhaps for the rest of their lives.
And reviewing the book again yesterday, one of the terms that keeps recurring, I found, was the word proactive, and the importance for women to be proactive. And you make the point that you can start at any age, it's never too late, but the earlier you start, the better, and being proactive about gaining financial independence, the better.
Oh, 100%. And, you know, I wrote it at a time when my stepdaughter was about to finish high school. I have a bunch of nieces, some of them blood, some not. But, you know, friends, daughters of my best friends, and I've been around since they were born. And they were all, you know, mid-teenage years, about to finish high school, maybe going into uni. And just thinking about, you know, the more successful outcomes that you can have financially during your life if you've just started a little earlier, and whether that is, you know, in your 20s or even in your early 30s, you know, we're not saying that you need to necessarily just go out there and, you know, live on baked beans for 3 years as soon as you start earning any money after university or anything. But as we all know, Terry, you know, the longer that you're in the market, the better the outcome will be over the long term. And, you know, if some of these people of either gender, if they could get into the property market in their 20s, could you imagine the results that they could have later on in life, and the choices that they may have? And I think what was quite different with our book as well was that we were very keen to provide all the information that people need to understand to make informed decisions themselves. And we talk about all of the different, not all of them, but, you know, a lot of the main strategies out there. But we're not pushing a particular barrow. We're saying, well, this is all the things that you need to know about these different strategies. One of these might suit one person and probably won't suit the other for a whole variety of reasons. So the book, we really wanted it to be an educational piece that people could read, and then they would feel that they were educated enough to therefore make informed decisions about what they wanted to do.
Yeah, there's a lot I like about this book. It's full of great information. It's well written and it's very easy to read. But the thing I liked the most about it was the case studies. And I thought, you know, it's one thing to write about the theory, but to illustrate it with case studies of women who have done it successfully and have overcome great barriers, just made the book so much more impactful. And so one of the first case studies that are in the book, I don't know if you remember all these, maybe you do, Claire's story, someone who came to Kate, your co-author, as a buyer's agent, wanted to buy an investment property, add to a portfolio, and she already owned 6 properties. And it was perhaps a case study of what can be achieved by somebody who just independently goes out there and accumulates good property and builds a portfolio.
100%, and clearly all of those case studies are real women. They have had their names changed for privacy reason, but they're all former clients or maybe still current clients of Kate's. So we loved that about the book. Certainly Wiley loved that about the book too. We're showing and telling, I suppose, from a narrative point of view. And these are real women, and some of them have had significant success like that. But there are other case studies in the book where it's actually been, they've been through, maybe it's divorce or maybe even they've been widowed, and it's about them getting back on the ladder or doing, something with the budget that they have. So a lot of people, Terry, thank you for saying that, because a lot of people have said that about the book, that's a significant difference out there compared to a lot of the other books in the same sort of league or field, that we're actually showing real life examples of women that have been there and done that. And, their levels of success are personal to themselves. Their journeys are personal to themselves. The decisions they've made are bespoke as well to them. And that was really important to us too, was to show a variety of different real life women who have become property owners and property investors. Because at the end of the day, there is no one size fits all approach in property investment. And I think a lot of people, unfortunately, don't understand that. There are so many different strategies out there that they can engage with, but also it's about you personally, your risk profile, your goals, your dreams, your family situation, your income levels, all of these things. There's a plethora of different things that will make you as an individual make different choices to even one of your best girlfriends who you think that you're quite similar to. You actually might find that you actually are both suited to something quite different.
So one of the quotes here in the book, as part of the case study, the woman described as Claire, is that it says there really is no limit to what women like Claire, who have a clear plan and know their own risk profile, can achieve. And the key thing for me there is having a clear plan, because I find most investors that I encounter every day with what we do really don't have a plan. They just have a vague notion that they think they should be doing something about property investment. They don't really have a strategy or an end game. And I think that's a really key thing.
And I think it's true of anything in life almost, Terry. Whether it's your career or anything like that, how do you know, how can you get somewhere if you don't actually know where you're going? So that is just so key with property investment, or whether it's within your own career. Certainly for younger people, you really need to sit back and do some forward planning. And I guess, when you're young, you sort of fly by the seat of your pants, which is really fun, let's be honest. But it's also, you really need to have, I guess, a plan to what you want to achieve, and certainly in property investment. And for a lot of people, it's different for everybody. It's different for everyone. It might be, someone might say, well, I would just like to own, one property, or I might want to own 5 or whatever. But that's why it's so important to make sure that you're working with bona fide experts in the space, obviously doing your research and things like that. Because unfortunately, even if you've got a plan to own several investment properties, the statistics show us that the majority of Australians don't actually achieve that for a variety of reasons, including probably stuffing up the first one that they've bought.
That's right. 75%.
That's a technical term. That's a technical term.
It is, and a very apt term as well. 75% of people who own an investment property have just one. Another 15% have 2. Those who own 5 or more are less than 1% of the total. And there's a good reason for that. And I think it's partly because so many people go into it blind, without a plan, without being willing to do research, and without being willing to perhaps pay for good advice. I think that's so important. The people who succeed are willing to spend money to make money, I think.
And it's funny, isn't it, that, and this is a key part of what, why Pippa exists, and all of our members as well. It's weird, isn't it, human nature, that we go to, a specialist if there's something wrong with our body, or there's something wrong with their car, but when it comes to property, I guess because everyone generally lives in one, and they can touch and feel it, they, unfortunately, they think that it's quite simple, and often, when I've seen it so many times because, you know, you've been around longer than me, Terry, but I'm getting a bit long on the tooth myself, the investors, the people out there that then go on and promote themselves of having this great success, often they've just had the luck of riding the market up when, you know, Blind Freddie could have done the same thing. So that's what we, because obviously property investment advice is an unregulated sector. So that's where PIPA, you know, sits. That's why we exist. We've decided that in lieu of government regulation, which there doesn't seem to be any forthcoming, we will become the self-regulatory body as much as we can. And a key part of what we're doing is educating the public to understand that, you know, there are specialists out there, there are experts out there in property investment advice, and this is what they look like. You know, they usually are members of PIPA, or they're experts in their field. They've been around a long time doing research and analysis, and just to get consumers to understand that if they're really wanting to follow someone, you know, or believe what they see on Instagram, often those people are getting paid to promote that stuff as well, but they really need to do their research. We're talking about investing hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. Do your research and make sure that the person that you are following, in whichever regard that is, actually knows what they're talking about and has runs on the board.
And actually has some skin in the game, you know.
Yeah, that's right. Had some skin in the game.
There seems to be thousands of people out there wanting to call themselves buyers agents who really have nothing to offer. I had a communication only yesterday with a guy who said he doesn't own any investment properties. He doesn't plan to buy any investment properties, but he's setting himself up as a buyer's agent. And I thought, what could you possibly offer to anybody without absolutely no experience? But perhaps we're getting a little bit off topic.
No, we probably are. Sorry for that.
It's a whole other 1 hour discussion, isn't it? I was actually doing a strategy session today with a young woman who seems to be going about it the right way. She's in her early 20s, I think. She's in Sydney. She realises that with the price of property in Sydney, she's got no hope of getting started there. She works in a job where she can be anywhere to do what she does. So she basically has made the decision she's willing to go anywhere on the east coast of Australia to buy a property as her first home. It could be in Queensland, it could be on the coast, it could be inland in Toowoomba, it could be wherever in those two states, just to get started. And she's willing to move herself in her life to wherever she can get the best deal to get herself started. And I thought, there's someone who understands that to get started, to get your foot in, you need to make compromises and sacrifices, and she's willing to do it. And I thought, well, good for you. I think she'll be successful ultimately.
Oh, that's fantastic. And you know, a good friend of ours may have released something today about the rent vesting strategy, which is what we've mentioned in the book as well. You know, with record high rents, is rent vesting still a sound investment strategy? Clearly, the answer is overwhelmingly yes. Rents certainly have increased, but mortgage repayments have increased more. And so certainly over the last decade or so, we've seen an increase of the number of people who may not have the flexibility to do that. And I applaud her. That's amazing. You know, I'd like to meet her sometime that have decided, well, I need to stay living in Sydney or Melbourne, or it could even be Brisbane. You know, I need to actually stay here because this is where my job is. They might not have flexible work practices, but instead of kind of going, oh, well, that's me, you know, they might not be able to afford to buy in those cities. They can afford to rent. They've decided then to go off and buy an investment property in a more affordable location, preferably with the use of an expert to help guide them, because it's not, you know, easy to determine which locations you should be buying, and if you've never actually even been there. But a lot of more people are doing that as well, which is wonderful, because the same concept, right? They will not be defeated. They know they need to make compromises to get into the market. My own personal example, when I bought my first property in 2007, it was just before the Brisbane market was moving, but it hadn't boomed completely yet. I wanted to buy. I still wasn't earning that much money. My younger brother at the time was 10 years younger than me. We decided to actually buy a property in middle ring suburb of Brisbane together as tenants in common. And at the time, you know, I think I was 70% and he was 30%. And we joined forces And it wasn't like, neither of us, when we were very good friends and brother and sister, but, he would probably wanted to live in the valley, and I'd been living in West End going to uni, and we moved to a middle ring suburb of Brisbane. And I had we stayed there, living there together for a couple of years. He wanted to move back into the city, wanted to sell. I didn't want to sell. I bought him out. And I lived there for a little bit longer, and then I turned it into an investment property, and I held on to that property for 15 years. So if I hadn't have bought that with my brother, and that was the cornerstone of my investment portfolio, I borrowed against that property twice, so if I hadn't have done that and compromised myself, my story would be completely different than it is sitting here today. So it's about recognizing that your first one's not going to be your last, and doing what needs to be done to enable you, to get into the market. And at the time, I remember the purchase price was $350, and I was horrified. I was horrified because that was like 6 times my annual income at the time, and I was just like, oh my Lord, what am I doing? Clearly now, and the benefit of hindsight, great, that property did amazing. But yeah, it's about making those compromises and recognizing that you have to start somewhere, and that your first one, you need to get that one right. You do need to get it right, but you actually need to buy it as well at some point.
So just going back to the book and the case studies, I don't know, I might be asking a bit much for you to remember all these case studies, but there's one called Lisa's story. At the end of this page, a case study about Lisa, it says, Lisa is the ultimate female investor. Do you remember that one?
It's been a while since I've read the book.
Her first goal was to pay off her home, which was a unit she bought when she was younger. She did that, and then she worked on paying off the debt on her investment properties. But she obviously somebody who very methodically went about eliminating debt and then using the equity that she created to expand a portfolio, and was considered in the book to be the ultimate female investor.
Well, that's the key, isn't it? You have to start somewhere, and if you hopefully, the first property that you buy, whilst you will have to make sacrifices and compromises on price points and location, clearly, you can still do well out of that property. And whether you're living in it yourself as a homeowner, or it's automatically an investment property, the key, if you do want to, improve your financial future, and maybe grow a modest portfolio, that first one needs to have the ability to grow in value, of which then hopefully you can borrow against it and rinse and repeat.
Yeah, and I think we should probably point out that getting that first one right doesn't mean you have to buy a quality property in a great location, because what I've learned along the way is ugly real estate grows in value too. My first one was about as ugly as a house could possibly be, but it was in a good suburb, and it grew in value and allowed me to get to the next one. And maybe on my third purchase, I was getting a little bit closer to where I wanted to be.
Me too. That's true. I mean, when I bought that first property, everyone went, what the heck are you going out there for? We're talking about a suburb 10K from the city, but everyone was like, oh my Lord, what are you doing going out there? Like, now that suburb, you cannot buy a house under 1.2 million.
Yeah. Well, my first one was out in Ipswich. I was working at the Courier Mail in Bowen Hills. So I was getting on a train.
Wow.
And commuting for over an hour both ways every day. But the whole objective was to get started, to get the foot on the ladder. And it worked. And the case studies in the book also include some of the cautionary tales about things to avoid, because you're talking about important to get the first one right. There's one here called Mining Town Woes. And there's so many investors around Australia have been caught by that temptation and have lived to regret it.
Yeah, exactly. And that case study, I believe, might be one of the authors. Is it?
I believe it is. It's Kate's story, this one.
Yeah, so we've all stuffed up. And what was really important for us And, you know, we talk a lot in the book about staying away from single industry towns that, you know, where if their industry is going through a fallow patch, well, so will the property market and the local economy. And as a Queenslander like you, Terry, we all know the story of Gladstone. You know, it's funny, actually, I saw a story the other day where a particular journalist was trying to prove how much rents had gone up and was using Gladstone over the last 5 years as an example. And I was like, yeah, but that's because the rents there fell like, I don't know, 50%. But anyway, so you're staying away from those single industry towns that are just dependent on the fortunes of that particular industry. But we've all made mistakes, and it was very important to Kate and I that we owned up to our mistakes, our boo-boos when we've stuffed up, because I've certainly done it as well. In my property investment journey, I've made two quite significant mistakes that have cost me a significant amount of money. And I think if you are thinking about working with anyone who purports themselves to be an expert and they don't have an example of when they really made a mistake, I just don't think that that's probably true, or they should at least be honest and open about the fact when it didn't go their way, because we've all had those moments. We've all had those moments, and there's no beauty in them apart from learning from it and never doing it again.
I don't think anyone's got to a successful point in a career or as a property investor without making mistakes. The important thing is to learn the lesson and to avoid repeating a mistake, because
otherwise, isn't that the definition of insanity?
That's right. Nicola, I'm sort of wondering what it's like in this day and age as a woman going cap in hand to get a loan from a bank. What's different about that experience for a woman?
Well, I've only ever been a woman, so I can only speak to my own experience. Look, the first time round, you know, I wasn't earning enough for them to give me enough money to buy anything better than what I did. The third time around, look, it was interesting, actually. I was the editor of Australian Property Investor at the time, and my income had increased, you know, significantly and compared to when I first started. However, I remember this conversation with a lender at one of the big four banks where, and I'm pretty confident this wouldn't happen to a man, where the bank manager said to me, and I was the editor of Australian Property Investor at the time, I just want to mention that again, that he was worried for me, that I was taking on so much debt. And I said, I'll stop you there, whatever his name was. I'm pretty sure I know what I'm doing. Clearly, I have, you know, these two properties, they're bringing in this amount of income. I'm buying this one as my home. He goes, yeah, but I don't know. Doesn't it keep you awake at night having all these loans? And I was like going, no, but can you please just give me the money so I can buy this property? So that's my own personal experience. Clearly, we've had instances where we've heard of women being asked about their child producing intentions in the years ahead, and things of that nature, which is clearly gender bias. Look, I certainly would hope that sort of stuff doesn't happen as much anymore. My example I've just given was from nearly 10 years ago. But I think women face, you know, more headwinds just because clearly we generally don't earn as much as men. And often we are, not so much anymore, but still we're generally speaking to men when we're trying to secure finance as well. So there might be a little bit of a gender issue there too. So I don't know if that answers your question, but my own personal experience has been somewhat interesting.
Sounds like they were being just a tad patronising.
I know, man. Like, honestly, I couldn't believe it. I was sitting there going, you do know where I work, right? But anyway, so seemingly he still thought that was appropriate for him to say to the editor of Australian Property Investor, did I know what I was doing?
Sure. So we're here tonight talking about investing from the female perspective, and specifically talking about the best-selling book, female investor. I think it's planned that we're going to give away some copies of that book tonight. So, Tim, have we come up with a procedure via which we are able to do that tonight?
Yes, we do. We've got a couple of people that will get it randomly, but then also a couple for the best questions. So we've got probably another 10 or 15 minutes of having a chat prior to us going to the Q&A. So for anybody watching on Zoom or on Facebook Live, get your questions in because, we'll obviously have a bit of a Q&A at the end.
Okay.
I had a couple of questions I was going to jump in and ask Nicola as well, if I can too, Terry. Firstly, I just want to say congratulations too on the success of the book, Nicola. It's obviously, has it performed in the way that you were expecting, or is it done far better than you were expecting? It seems to be taking off everywhere I see. It's got awards.
Yeah, thank you. Look, Wiley, it was the first time that I've written a book with my name on the cover. I have had my fingers in other books as a ghostwriter in times gone by. So Wiley was super excited about it, and we wrote it obviously, and the production of it was very quick because they were really keen to get it on the shelves. So Kate and I were cautiously optimistic from that moment on. When your publishers really, really excited, well, then obviously
a good sign.
That's infectious. And the number of pre-sales that they told us about, this is like the start of last year, that was over and above what they were expecting as well. So that was really exciting for us, and clearly it was published globally. So it was quite interesting when you sort of know that your book's on sale in Barnes and Noble in the US. There were stores in the UK that had it. New Zealand stocked it a lot, of course, and clearly here in Australia. A lot of support from online retailers especially. So we've been super excited. And then when we won the award, the personal finance and investment category last year, I think it was in the end of November, both of us were just like so hoping that we would be finalists. And then we sat and watched it live because it was an online event. And when they announced that they announced us as the first finalist, and it was so exciting. And then Money for Jess was number 2 in our final in our grouping, and I was like, oh damn. I mean, Money for Jess with Jess is such a wonderful book. It actually won the overall book of the year, it's done very well at educating women about finances. But when that came up in our category, I was like, oh well. And then we won. I was just like, we were just so blown away. And I think, as I said at the outset of our chat tonight, the contents of both of our experiences and our heads, I suppose, and then you combine that with, it was quite unusual, I suppose, for a property investment book to be written by someone who also has a master's in creative writing. So I think that is really what probably pushed it to the next level as well.
Yeah. Absolutely, it looks like it has exceeded all expectations, which is great. I must say, for me, this is a topic that is quite close to my heart as well. I've seen firsthand, I'm one of 3 children, with my mum growing up us growing up in a broken marriage where mum was out of the workforce for 20 years, which obviously, of course, that certainly cuts into your super earning ability. So I've sort of seen what it can do, and it's something that, I'm working with clients these days and seeing more proficient that people are wanting to get into the market now, but they still have that anxiety. And I know this is a topic that you've talked a lot about openly as well, that, you can sit and procrastinate. And I suppose what I'd love to know from people that have read this book now, are you hearing stories that it's given them the confidence to be able to actually, pull the trigger?
Oh, honestly, Tim, look, Kate and I, for all of the success that the book has had, and as anyone who's written the book, it, generally speaking, it's altruistic in nature, because unless it's the barefoot investor, there's no riches coming in your door from royalties. Yeah. So we always said from the outset that if our book motivated and inspired one woman to go and purchase a property, then we'd done our job. Yeah. And honestly, dude, it was like within the first week of the book coming out, we got this beautiful message from a younger woman in Sydney. And that it had done its job like within the first week. And from that time on, and that just like, honestly, we both started crying because that was what we always wanted to achieve. And then from then, regularly all the time, I honestly, last week I got 2 messages on LinkedIn from women who had heard me on a particular podcast here or there, or had picked up the book, and they come through all the time. And honestly, they make my heart sing. And I know that Kate gets the same messages as well. And so for us, like, honestly, that is success in our language, is that if we, you know, and who knows how many, because obviously the book is sold quite well, you know, helping to inspire thousands of women and men too. I've certainly I did a book event last year in Toowoomba, interestingly, quite randomly, and a lot of the audience was older men, and I was like, oh lordy, this could be interesting. But as it turned out, they were there because they purchased a lot of copies of the book for their granddaughters.
Well, I can tell you now, looking at the attendees list there, and just by judging by the first names, I think we're probably sitting at about 50-50, to be honest. So
exactly. And I think that's and like we always say, and Terry said at the beginning, whilst the book is targeted towards women because of the, you know, financial imbalance that we have in our lives, the property investment advice in there isn't gender specific.
Exactly right.
So we certainly heard of a lot of men buying it, even for their wives. Actually, my downstairs neighbour told me the other day that he bought a copy for his ex-wife, and I'm like, sweet. So you hear all these stories all the time. And I met someone once at one of my girlfriend's friends had one of her friends over, and it was this young girl, and she was like, oh, this is my auntie Nicola, and she wrote this book. And she went, oh my God, my mum has that book. She loves it. And I was just stuff like that, where you just, there's all these little, you know, bits that are happening everywhere. And when you sit back here, sometimes in a little bit of isolation, it's lovely to hear those stories and to meet these people firsthand.
Amazing. Well, one of the things that I picked up was that you said, don't save your worries until there's something to worry about.
Yeah.
And I used to call my mum Chicken Little because she always thought the sky was going to fall on her head. She always worried about, you know, what was going to happen. I said, how can it happen if you haven't even, you know, got in the door yet? So I think what a lot of people will take away from this book is that it'll get the confidence to actually give it a go. And I think that in itself is remarkable, because most people think about real estate as making money, but it's the security that real estate gives you as well. Not just a roof over your head, but by having investment properties, it actually gives you options when, you know, things are inevitably going to go wrong. And when they do go wrong, you know, you might have some equity to fall back on. You might have the ability to sell down a property and help you out. And I think something you touched on earlier on today in the call was that even if you aren't making huge equity gains, if you can pay off your own home, that is a huge win. And I feel like what property investment does is give you those options. It can actually change your life, as cliche as that may sound.
Yeah, but I mean, at the end of the day, you know, housing is one of our fundamental needs.
Yeah.
And clearly, you know, there's something broken in the system here in Australia at the moment that's been building for some time. And so, you know, the book is The Female Investor: Creating Wealth, Security and Freedom Through Property. You know, and security is in there for a reason, because we don't have, a lot of women, unfortunately, don't have housing security in any way, even in the rental market, clearly at the moment. So it's about having a roof over your head throughout your life, and maintaining that, and having options when, as I said at the outset, if we had, and I think it's the final chapter in the book or thereabouts, this utopian vision of financial independence from each other, that if you know, yourself and your future partner both had a property that you owned separately, individually, and then you met, you left those ones alone, they became investment properties, they were siloed outside of the finances of the partnership. You might go off and buy a property together. Hopefully the relationship lasts for your lifetime. If it doesn't, okay, well, we've equally contributed to the property that we've got together. Let's split the proceeds from that, or whatever the division of that asset might look like. And then if they decided to sell it, well, then both of them, especially now, You know, if you wanted to go and rent at the moment, well, good luck to most people. But if they actually had assets outside of the relationship, they could actually even shift back at the end of a tenancy into those places. Otherwise, they could struggle, or they could end up staying in a bad relationship because they've literally got nowhere to go. And that is unfortunately the situation for many people at the moment.
Well, Terry, we have just hit the 45-minute mark. Did you have any other questions that you had for Nicola?
I could ask Nicola questions all night, but
and I would answer them, my friend.
I know, that's what I'm afraid of. So I'm not going to ask any more. Look, I think we've sort of the discussions provide a really good basis for people to have the idea of taking action. And I think that the next step for anybody who's interested is to get a copy of this book. How do they do that? I mean, I assume anyone can walk into any good bookstore and get a copy of the book. Given that it's a bestseller and an award winner, that should be the case.
Yes. Bookstores still have it. Probably the biggest volumes out there are on your online retailers, certainly Amazon and Booktopia, who have been strong supporters of the female investor. So I think that would probably be the best place to get it. I mean, obviously there's various new books that have come out in between now and then, but there's still a great stock of them available online for anyone who would like to get their hands on a copy.
Okay. Very good. So we didn't have a lot of questions. We had a lot of compliments. People saying thank you very much for that. And where can we get the book was one of the questions, but Terry's just answered that for us. We're going to give away a couple of books now. So I'm going to give one. We've got a random machine here. It's just taking its while to stop. Okay, the first one is for Monica Mercedes. Congratulations, Monica. We've got your registration details, so we'll reach out following this and organise to get that in the post for you. The second one was Peter Goller. Third one, Kelly Gillen. Hello, Kelly. And then last one, Dan Uden. So excellent. Congratulations to everybody there. We will make sure that we get these into the post for you tomorrow or Monday.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. That's amazing.
Thanks so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me, guys. I've really enjoyed it, and I know I tend to segue and go off topic a little bit, but hopefully people have found it interesting. And I guess the key takeaway for me throughout this whole process, you know, and as I say, we're a year and a bit after the book's been out, and before that, you know, we're sort of year 3 now, is just to, like Terry said as well, just to try to educate yourself. Make sure that the people that you are following are bona fide experts, have runs on the board, have skin in the game, and just do what you can to ensure that you educate yourself as much as possible so that you can make an informed decision about what's right for you personally.
Yep.
Very good. I just had Peter saying thank you so much. I never win anything, so congratulations.
Peter can't say that anymore.
No, that's right.
And I'm glad the only thing he won was a book called The Female Investor. That's even better.
That's it. It's a perfect read, and obviously it's very timely for Mother's Day as well. If you wanted to read,
indeed, what better gift than the gift of education, people?
Absolutely.
One of the things I've always believed for a long time is that all of the most successful people in the world have one thing in common: they read books. You know, very few people achieve great success in life without being an avid reader of books. There's so many great books out there on so many subjects: business, real estate, life, and this is a good one that's easy to read. So I would urge everybody to get a copy, have a read, and use it as a workbook, because you can do that. I think it's structured that way, really, isn't it?
Yes, that's right. We've got the sort of the to-do list at the end of every chapter and things like that. And also, like you said, Terry, you know, you never stop learning. You know, no matter what age you are, you never stop learning. And the way that you do that is via books, and then that's perfect. And I was a voracious reader when I was a child. I was always going to be a journalist. There was no question. But I'm not probably as voracious as I used to be, which is weird, you know. But I love a good book. If I like the writing style, you won't see me for a couple of days.
Well, I've got 3 or 4 books on the go, so I want to go and get into that.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Nicola, you've just jumped off a flight. You probably haven't had dinner yet.
That's all right. That's all
That's
right.
it.
I've just come back from Sydney. I was down there on Pepper Business for our national conference coming up later this year. So that was very exciting, and happy to come back and have a chat with you guys in my lounge room.
Very good. Well, we've got lots of thanks flooding into the Q&A. So thank you everybody for joining, and yeah, we hope to see you all again soon.
Thanks, guys.
Good on you.
Thanks, Nicola.